Hello, friends, and welcome back. I hope you're all doing well by God's grace. If you haven't already, please take a moment to subscribe and hit that bell icon so you never miss an update. This episode is divided into two parts. Let's start the first part. The courtroom was packed beyond capacity. Every seat filled, every eye locked on the Brown family. Towering stacks of documents sat like silent witnesses to years of buried secrets, all waiting to be exposed. The air was thick with anticipation as the judge leaned forward, gavel in hand, ready to bring order to what was already a storm of tension. A quiet murmur rippled through the gallery. One question lingered above all others: who had been lying and who would finally break under oath? This wasn't just a legal battle. It was a fight for truth, for survival, and for the unraveling of a family once held together by faith and unity. The heavy courtroom doors swung open. Sister Wives stars entered not as a united family, but as fractured individuals. Christine walked in first, chin lifted in defiance, her gaze scanning the room with calculated focus. Every step she took was deliberate, as though she had rehearsed this moment countless times. Janelle followed closely behind, her jaw tight, shoulders stiff with unspoken anger. She didn't look at Christine, but the distance between them felt symbolic: shared pain, unspoken truths. Meri hesitated at the doorway. Her eyes started nervously, as if unsure whether she was stepping into a courtroom or a trap. Yet she moved forward, carrying the weight of years in silence. Then came Robyn and Kody. Her grip on his arm was tight, almost desperate, while her eyes flickered with barely concealed fear. Kody, on the other hand, tried to project confidence, adjusting his cufflinks like a man preparing for a performance. But the bead of sweat forming on his forehead betrayed him. Cameras clicked. Pens scratched. The tension became almost suffocating. The judge entered, his expression unreadable. Court is now in session. The gavel struck. This wasn't a criminal case, yet, but the accusations carried just as much weight: financial mismanagement, betrayal of trust, emotional manipulation, and a disputed will that no one saw coming. The mere mention of a will sent shockwaves through the room. This was a family that once preached unity over ownership, so why was inheritance suddenly at the center of everything? The judge began outlining the evidence. A joint account containing over $800,000 had been drained over several years. Transfers were made quietly during holidays, vacations, often when not all family members were present. Then came the bombshell, an anonymous email alleging that one wife had secretly moved funds into a private LLC. All eyes shifted. The first witness, a financial advisor, laid out transaction logs. Names appeared repeatedly: Kody, Robyn, occasionally Christine and Janelle. But Meri? Only once, years ago. That detail didn't go unnoticed. Then Christine stood. Her voice was calm, but every word carried weight. She spoke of years of questioning the finances, years of being told not to worry, until she saw the truth for herself. Receipts, transfers, missing funds. She held up proof of a $100,000 transaction made during a time the family was told they couldn't afford basic expenses, even Christmas gifts. The courtroom fell silent. This wasn't unity, she said firmly. This was control. Kody tried to interrupt, but the judge shut him down instantly. Christine continued, revealing how her requests for transparency were dismissed, how her concerns were labeled as drama. But she hadn't stopped. She had gathered evidence, hundreds of records. And now, everything was here. The following day, the courtroom felt even heavier. Christine's full testimony painted a picture of a family slowly unraveling from within. She described how things changed after Robyn entered the family, how decisions began happening behind closed doors, how financial transparency disappeared. Then came the documents: missing funds meant for home repairs, unexplained purchases, private accounts. A custom ring purchased while medical expenses for her child went unpaid. Her words cut deep: if you have no trust, you're not a wife. You're a liability. Then Janelle took the stand. Her voice was steady, but what she revealed shook the room. She had tracked the finances herself, meticulously. She noticed money disappearing month after month. When she contacted the bank, she learned the transfers were authorized internally. Only 2 people had that level of access: Kody and Robyn. Janelle didn't stop there. She brought in forensic analysis, emails, and even surveillance footage showing private agreements being signed without the family's knowledge. The courtroom was no longer just tense, it was explosive. And just when it seemed things couldn't get worse, Meri stood. Her voice was quiet, but powerful. She revealed something deeper than financial betrayal. She spoke of being pushed out, erased from decisions, even removed from estate documents without her consent. Then came the most shocking claim of all, a forged signature. The room erupted. Meri described overhearing conversations, plans to quietly cut her out of the family, to let her fade away. She had stayed silent for years, until now. "I'm not here to punish anyone," she said. "I'm here to stop being punished." By the time Kody finally took the stand, the damage was undeniable. His answers were vague, defensive. When asked if he approved the transfers, he admitted a qualified yes. That was the moment everything shifted. The narrative he had built for years began to collapse under the weight of evidence, testimony, and truth. And just when it seemed the trial had reached its peak, a sealed box of new financial records was delivered to the judge. The courtroom froze. Because everyone knew, whatever was inside that box could change everything. The courtroom didn't settle after the revelations, it fractured. Voices overlapped, whispers turned into accusations, and the fragile sense of order dissolved almost instantly. Robyn shot to her feet, her composure finally cracking. Her voice trembled, but it carried across the room with sharp urgency. "This is an orchestrated attack," she said, scanning the room as if searching for allies who were no longer there. "You're all jealous. I did what I had to do to protect my children." Kody rose beside her, his movements abrupt, defensive. "You don't understand the pressure I was under," he snapped. "Everything I did for this family." But the words no longer carried authority. They sounded hollow, like echoes from a narrative that had already collapsed. The judge slammed the gavel down hard, the sharp crack cutting through the chaos. "Order," he commanded, his voice firm and final. But even as silence fell, the damage had already been done. The illusion of unity was gone, replaced by something far more raw: exposure. Christine leaned forward from her seat, her voice steady but laced with disbelief. "We turned on you," she said, shaking her head. "Or did we finally open our eyes?" That question lingered in the air like smoke. And then Meri spoke again, quiet but unmistakable. "He told me not to trust any of you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, yet it carried across the entire room. "He said you were trying to destroy the family." Janelle turned sharply. "He told me the same thing." Christine nodded slowly, her expression hardening. "Me too." All eyes shifted to Kody. For the first time since the trial began, he didn't look angry. He looked cornered. The judge stood, clearly recognizing the volatility of the moment. "This court will recess for 1 hour," he announced. But no one moved. Because the real trial wasn't happening between lawyers anymore, it was unfolding between the people themselves. Meri slowly stood before anyone could stop her. She stepped forward, not toward the judge, but toward the center of the room, as if drawn there by something deeper than protocol. "Everything you've heard is true," she said. The room went completely still. "But it's not the whole truth." Even the judge paused, watching her carefully now. "You'll have your turn, Mrs. Brown," he said. Meri gave a small nod. "I just wanted you to know, this isn't over." Only then did the gavel fall again, signaling the official recess. When the court reconvened, the energy had changed. The earlier tension had evolved into something heavier, something inevitable. Conversations had quieted. Even the reporters, who had rushed out earlier to file breaking headlines, now sat in near silence, sensing that something irreversible was about to unfold. The judge entered more slowly this time, his expression measured, almost cautious. "We will now hear testimony from Meri Brown." Meri stood without hesitation. She didn't shuffle papers or glance around nervously. She walked to the stand with calm certainty, the kind that only comes after years of silence, finally reaching its breaking point. When she took the oath, her voice didn't waver. I didn't want to speak, she began. Because I knew if I did, nothing would ever be the same again. No one interrupted. I spent years protecting a family that wasn't protecting me, she continued. I stayed quiet while things were taken from me piece by piece until there was almost nothing left. Her hands tightened slightly on the edge of the stand, but her voice only grew stronger. You've heard about the money, the accounts, the lies, she said. But what you haven't heard is what was said when no one else was supposed to be listening. She paused. 3 years ago, I overheard a conversation between Kody and Robyn. Across the room, Robyn stiffened. They thought I wasn't there, Meri continued. Kody said, Meri doesn't need to know. She's already halfway out. Let her fade quietly. A ripple of shock moved through the courtroom. I waited, Meri said softly. I waited for you to defend me. Her eyes finally met Robyn's. You didn't. Silence. The kind that presses down on your chest. A week later, I was removed from estate communications, she continued. No explanation. No discussion. Just gone. She presented documents, emails, letters, official notices. And then, she said, her voice sharpening, I received a formal letter stating that my name had been removed from the trust. The judge leaned forward. Do you have proof of this? Meri slid the document forward. And the signature? The judge asked. Meri didn't hesitate. It wasn't mine. The courtroom erupted again. Gasps, whispers, disbelief. We had it analyzed, she added. It's a forgery. This time, even the judge's composure cracked slightly. Meri's gaze shifted first to Kody, then to Robyn. You said you were protecting the family, she said. But what you were really doing was controlling it. Robyn shook her head, tears streaming now. I didn't sign anything, she insisted. Meri cut in, her voice firm. Then why were you emailing the estate lawyer? Why were you asking how quickly the process could be completed? No answer came. Because there wasn't one. The courtroom felt like it was holding its breath as Meri reached for her final piece of evidence. This, she said, placing a transcript on the stand, is from a voice recording. Kody's head snapped up. It was sent by mistake, Meri continued. A message intended for Robyn. She looked down briefly, then began to read. Meri's been dragging us down for years. I don't care what she needs anymore. We'll just close the door quietly. A wave of stunned silence followed. Even Christine covered her mouth. Janelle looked away. The judge's voice cut in, quieter now. Is the original recording available? Yes, Meri said. And it's been verified. That was it. The final crack. By the time Meri stepped down, the courtroom no longer felt like a place of judgment. It felt like the aftermath of something breaking apart in real time. Kody sat motionless, staring at the table in front of him. Robyn didn't move either. Tears fell freely, but she made no attempt to wipe them away. Christine leaned back slowly, her eyes filled not just with pain, but with something closer to closure. Janelle lowered her head, exhaling a breath that felt years overdue. And above them all, the judge looked down at the growing stack of evidence, understanding what everyone else already did. This wasn't just a case anymore. It was the unraveling of an entire reality. Just as the court began to process what had been revealed, the doors opened once more. A man stepped inside, carrying a sealed box marked under court order. He approached the bench and handed it to the bailiff. These were requested under sealed subpoena, he said. The judge opened the lid slightly, just enough to glance inside. His expression changed. Robyn went pale. Kody's eyes widened. We will reconvene in 20 minutes, the judge said abruptly. The gavel struck. And, just like that, everything paused again. But this time, it wasn't uncertainty in the air. It was inevitability. Because whatever was inside that box was about to finish what the testimonies had started. The 20-minute recess felt longer than the entire trial. No one truly relaxed. No one even spoke above a whisper. The courtroom buzzed with quiet speculation, each person trying to piece together what could possibly be inside that sealed box and why it had shaken the judge so visibly. When the doors finally reopened, the energy shifted again. This time, it wasn't tension. It was dread. The judge returned to the bench, slower than before, his expression unreadable, but heavier. He didn't immediately call the room to order. Instead, he glanced once more at the contents of the box now resting beside him, as if confirming to himself that what he had seen was real. Then the gavel struck. Court is back in session. The sound echoed deeper this time. Before we proceed further, the judge began, his voice measured. The court has received additional financial disclosures under sealed subpoena. These documents will now be entered into preliminary review. A ripple moved through the courtroom. Kody shifted in his seat, his confidence, what little remained, visibly draining. Robyn sat frozen beside him, her hands clasped so tightly they had turned pale. This court will now call Kody Brown back to the stand. The words landed like a final warning. Kody stood slowly. Gone was the swagger from earlier. Gone was the performative confidence. What remained was something far more fragile, a man walking toward a version of truth he could no longer control. He took the oath again, his voice quieter this time, less certain. The attorney approached without hesitation. "Mr. Brown," she began, "we're going to revisit RNC Holdings." Kody exhaled sharply, rubbing his hands together. "I've already explained. You've given partial explanations," the attorney cut in smoothly. "We're going to clarify them now." A document was placed in front of him. "Do you recognize this?" Kody glanced down. For a brief moment, something flickered across his face, recognition, followed by panic. "Yes," he said slowly. "Please state for the record what it is." "It's a financial structure document," he replied. "Standard asset protection." The attorney nodded slightly. "And is it standard for such structures to be funded using shared family trust accounts, without full disclosure to all beneficiaries?" Kody hesitated. "That depends on yes or no, Mr. Brown." A pause. "No." The word landed heavily. The courtroom reacted instantly, subtle gasps, shifting bodies, the quiet sound of realization settling in. The attorney stepped closer. "Let's move on." "These documents," she said, gesturing to the sealed box now partially opened, contain detailed transaction logs that were not previously disclosed to this court. Kody's jaw tightened. Transactions totaling over $1, $2 million. This time, the reaction wasn't subtle. It was shock. Christine's head snapped up. Janelle leaned forward. Even Meri's composure faltered for a fraction of a second. The attorney continued. "These funds were transferred over a period of 5 years into multiple accounts tied directly or indirectly to RNC Holdings." She placed another sheet in front of him. "Can you confirm that these accounts were under your control?" Kody swallowed. "Yes." "And were all family members informed?" Silence. "Mr. Brown?" "No." The word came out quieter this time. Smaller. The attorney didn't stop. "Let's talk about authorization. Several of these documents require multiple signatures for fund transfers exceeding $50,000. Yet, we have records here showing single-party approvals." She paused. "Would you like to explain how that was possible?" Kody's hands clenched. "I had executive authority," he said, his voice tightening. "Executive authority," the attorney repeated. "Granted by whom?" Another pause. No answer. "Because there wasn't one that could hold." Then came the moment no one was prepared for. The attorney lifted a final document from the box. "This," she said, "is a signed authorization form transferring full discretionary control of the family trust to a single individual." The room froze. Kody's eyes locked onto the paper. "Mr. Brown," she continued, "can you confirm the signature on this document?" He didn't respond. "Mr. Brown." His voice, when it finally came, was barely audible. "Yes." "And whose signature is it?" Another pause. "Then mine." The courtroom erupted. The judge slammed the gavel repeatedly. "Order! Order!" But even that couldn't contain the magnitude of what had just been admitted. Christine leaned back in her chair, her face a mixture of disbelief and validation. Janelle shook her head slowly, as if replaying years of confusion in a single moment of clarity. Meri closed her eyes briefly. Not in shock, but in confirmation. The attorney stepped back slightly, letting the silence stretch just long enough to settle. "Mr. Brown," she said finally, "is it accurate to state that you consolidated financial control of the family assets without the informed consent of the other members? Kody didn't answer immediately. His shoulders, once squared, had begun to slump. The weight of every testimony, every document, every contradiction had finally caught up with him. Yes, he said. There it was. Not a deflection. Not an excuse. Just the truth. And it changed everything. But the unraveling wasn't finished. Because the judge wasn't done. He leaned forward, hands folded, eyes fixed on Kody with a new intensity. Mr. Brown, he said, this court has also reviewed preliminary notes regarding potential document irregularities, including allegations of forgery. Kody's head snapped up. You're advised to answer carefully. The room went silent again. Did you, at any point, authorize or participate in the falsification of signatures related to trust modifications? Kody's breathing became visible now. Shallow. Uneven. He started, then stopped. For the first time, he looked uncertain. Not about what to say, but about what he could deny. I didn't, he began again. Then his voice faltered. The judge didn't interrupt. He simply waited. And that silence forced the truth forward. I didn't sign it, Kody said quickly. But I knew about it. The words hit harder than any confession before. Robyn's head turned sharply toward him. Kody, but he didn't look at her. He couldn't. Because in that moment, everything shifted. Knowledge became complicity. Silence became participation. And the narrative, whatever remained of it, collapsed completely. The judge leaned back slowly. The courtroom was no longer chaotic. It was stunned. Because this wasn't just exposure anymore. It was accountability. We will recess for final review of this evidence, the judge said at last. The gavel fell. But no one moved right away. Because everyone understood what had just happened. This wasn't just a bad day in court. This was the end of something that had been breaking for years. Kody remained seated for a moment longer than everyone else. Staring forward. Not at the judge. Not at the attorneys. Not even at the women who had once stood beside him. Just forward. As if trying to find something that wasn't there anymore. Robyn reached for him, but hesitated. Christine didn't look back. Janelle stood quietly, gathering her things with steady hands. Meri paused at the aisle. For a brief moment, she looked at Kody. Not with anger. Not even with sadness. But with something far more final. Understanding. Then she turned and walked away. And as the courtroom slowly emptied, one truth remained louder than anything that had been said. The secrets weren't buried anymore. They were documented. Proven. Admitted. And whatever came next wouldn't be about uncovering the truth. It would be about facing the consequences. The final session began in silence. Not the tense, whisper-filled silence from before, but something heavier. Something settled. The kind of silence that comes when everyone already knows the truth and is just waiting to hear it confirmed. The courtroom filled slowly, deliberately. No rushing this time. No frantic energy. Even the reporters seemed subdued, their pens ready but their expressions cautious. Because this wasn't about discovery anymore. This was about judgment. The judge entered without looking up. No pause. No hesitation. The gavel struck once. Court is now in final session. The words carried weight, finality echoing through every corner of the room. Kody sat at the defense table, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes fixed downward. Whatever confidence he once carried was gone. Robyn sat beside him, hands folded tightly in her lap, her gaze distant, unfocused. Across the room, Christine, Janelle, and Meri sat together, not as a united front, but as something stronger. Witnesses to the truth. The judge adjusted the documents in front of him, the now expanded stack of evidence that had grown with every testimony, every revelation, every crack in the story that once held this family together. I have reviewed the testimonies, he began, as well as the financial records, supporting documentation, and supplemental disclosures submitted under sealed order. He paused. And in that pause, the entire courtroom seemed to lean forward. This case, he continued, does not fall within traditional criminal parameters. However, the conduct presented raises serious legal and ethical concerns regarding fiduciary responsibility, financial transparency, and informed consent among involved parties. Kody shifted slightly. The judge's gaze lifted. "Mr. Brown," he said, his tone sharpening, "you are entrusted with shared financial oversight." Instead, what has been demonstrated is a pattern of unilateral decision-making, undisclosed asset transfers, and the consolidation of control without the knowledge or approval of all stakeholders. Each word landed like a verdict in itself. "You admitted," the judge continued, "to transferring significant funds into privately controlled entities. You further acknowledged that such actions were not fully disclosed." Kody didn't look up. "And while this court will defer any criminal determinations to the appropriate authorities," the judge added, "it is clear that the integrity of the shared financial structure has been compromised." A quiet murmur moved through the room. The judge turned a page. Regarding the contested estate and trust, every head lifted. This court finds sufficient cause to enact an immediate and indefinite freeze on all assets associated with the family trust and any connected entities, including but not limited to RNC Holdings. The words hit like a shockwave. Robyn inhaled sharply. Kody's head snapped up, but too late. Additionally, the judge continued, an independent forensic audit will be conducted. All financial activity over the past 5 years will be reviewed in full. Christine closed her eyes briefly. Janelle exhaled slowly. Meri didn't move, but her grip on her seat loosened, just slightly. The judge's voice remained steady. Pending the results of that audit, the court will determine appropriate redistribution of assets, as well as any potential civil liabilities arising from mismanagement or breach of fiduciary duty. Then came the final blow. And concerning the allegations of document forgery, the room froze again. This matter will be formally referred for further investigation. Should evidence confirm intentional falsification of legal documents, appropriate legal action will follow. No one spoke. No one moved. Because this was no longer just a family matter. It had crossed into something far more serious. The judge leaned back slightly, his tone softening, but only just. This court recognizes that beyond the financial disputes lies a deeper fracture, one of trust, communication, and mutual respect. His gaze shifted across the room, Christine, Janelle, Meri, then Kody and Robyn. While this court cannot repair those personal bonds, it can and will ensure that fairness, transparency, and accountability are restored moving forward. A final pause. Then this session is concluded. The gavel struck. Once. And, just like that, it was over. But the ending didn't feel like closure. It felt like aftermath. No one rushed out this time. No sudden movement. No chaotic exit. Just stillness. Kody remained seated for a long moment after the judge had left. His hands rested on the table, motionless, as if he no longer knew what to do with them. The fight had drained out of him completely. Robyn looked toward him, her expression searching, but whatever she was looking for, she didn't find it. Slowly, she stood. But she didn't reach for him this time. Across the room, Christine rose first. Not dramatically. Not triumphantly. Just calmly. Janelle followed, gathering her things with quiet precision. Meri stood last. For a brief second, the 3 women stood in the same space, not divided, not distant, but aligned in something unspoken. Not victory. Not revenge. Something closer to release. Christine glanced toward the exit. Janelle nodded. Meri took one final look behind her, not at the courtroom, not at the judge's bench, but at Kody. He didn't look back. And maybe that was the point. They walked out together. Not as they had entered, but stronger, clearer, free. Behind them, the courtroom slowly emptied. The reporters would write their stories. The headlines would spread. The public would debate, speculate, choose sides. But none of that would change what had already happened inside those walls. Because the truth had done what it always does eventually, it surfaced. And Kody? He finally stood. Alone now. The noise of the room fading around him, replaced by something far louder, the echo of every choice that led him here. He glanced once toward the door where they had exited. Then back at the table. Then down at his hands. As if realizing, too late, that control had never really been his to keep. And somewhere beyond the courtroom, beyond the documents, beyond the testimony and the verdict, a different story was beginning. Not about betrayal, not about loss, but about rebuilding. On truth, on clarity, on something real. The first part is over. Don't forget to like this video and hit that subscribe button and join our YouTube family. Thank you for your support. Next part of this videos are coming very soon.